I had never played any of the Metal Gear Solid games.
To me, Snake has always been the one guy in Smash Bros. That actually had a firearm. Well, that all changed today. With Delta just releasing, I thought it would be appropriate to play and rank each title, including the unorthodox spin-offs you haven't heard of. Per usual, one game will get the S+ ranking, be deemed the best in the franchise, and another the F ranking and crowned the worst. I quickly realized that this was a where have you been my whole entire life situation when I got into these games, so go ahead and comment your favorite and least favorite Metal Gear game down below. The NES and SNES era of gaming is something I always find so hard to go back to. And this is actually where Metal Gear was birthed. Technically originally released on the MSX, the NES versions is what we had here in the States. And since I played the HD collection, that has the MSX versions on there, so the Nintendo versions will not be talked about in this video. Sorry in advance. And although this is where Metal Gear was started, I just did not have a good time with this game. As a matter of fact, the first two games at that. Games this old have a common theme in giving the player nearly no direction and relatively difficult as well. And the original Metal Gear is no different. Seriously, I had no idea what the fuck I was doing at any given moment while playing this. I wanted to enjoy the game, but as I said before, it's really hard to go back to. For what it does for the story of Metal Gear is extremely relevant, but the gameplay and enjoyability just isn't there. It gets major props for being one of, if not the first video game to have any type of stealth element or gameplay to it whatsoever, so that's certainly relevant. But the only reason you should ever come back and play this is if you like really care about the story, I guess. Other than that, this is sadly a D-tier experience. Look, I'm not gonna waste your time here. Snake's Revenge was the second Metal Gear game ever made, and Kojima actually had nothing to do with this. It's not necessarily a bad game, but for sure not what Kojima had in mind, despite coming out and saying that he wasn't necessarily upset with that it existed in the first place, or even really tarnish the franchise name. The game solely exists to appeal to North American audiences and didn't even get a Japanese release. Play the game for roughly 30 minutes. I mean, it's not canon, so it's hard to get into. This is another D tier. Moving on to Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, where we have the same hardware, but a much more improved experience. We've got better graphics, better gameplay, it's easier, but at the end of the day, you're still going to need some type of guide to play this game without wandering for hours. The game also directly ties into 3D games in a massive way, which we'll talk about here in just 1 minute, and is at least a letter grade better than Metal Gear and is much more playable, but I wasn't exactly having a blast while playing this game either. In the grand scheme of things, once again, you're better off just watching a recap or just kind of doing a TLDR this one, even though once again, the story here is so relevant. In a weird way, I wish they would remake this game, but not like in the same way. I mean like reimagine it entirely, give it kind of like the Phantom Pain gameplay experience, but with the same story of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid. But that's asking way too much, especially since Kojima has nothing to do with Konami anymore. Regardless, this is a C tier, but I think this is kind of what got people into Metal Gear back in the day as well. Now into the first game in the Solid series, which is what most people see as the mainline games. As stated before, I had never played a Metal Gear game up until this video, and I'm so glad I got to keep it that way, because playing this game completely blind is such a great way to experience this entire franchise. I fucking love this game. Right off the bat, the opening cutscene with Snake and the submarine, you get a taste of the absolute cinematic experience you're about to get your hands on. It's pretty crazy how detailed each shot is, from camera angles and voice acting, and you have to highlight that voice acting part because it's something you notice immediately when you start playing. Each character has much more of a personality because of how hard the voice acting went in this game. Also, having Snake go full-blown let me try and f every single woman in this game at like within the first 5 minutes is awesome.
I just didn't expect a world-class designer of military technology to be so cute.
You're just flattering me. Well, if you make it back in one piece, maybe I'll let you do a strip search on me.
I'll hold you to that, Doctor.
Holy shit.
By the way, sorry to disappoint.
One of the first objectives is to get inside the tank hangar, and you have to sneak past some guards in Metal Gear fashion. And I was astonished to see one of the guards see my footprints in the snow to then be alerted, or the fact that when you have a gas mask on, when you go first person mode, you see the world as though you were actually wearing that gas mask. It may not seem like a big deal, but this is 1999 we're talking about. I mean, like, games just did not have this much attention to detail. Even today, this kind of thing still doesn't exist. Let's get on with the gameplay, which is about as classic as a single player story-driven experience can be. You have an objective, you get new items and equipment to progress the story, tons of boss fights, the occasional backtrack, and classic elements like increased health after each boss fight as well. Obviously, this is a stealth game at its core, but there's a lot more to it than just that. I would argue to say this is also a puzzle game. You know, you got to do a lot of like actual looking around and poking around and kind of trial and error to find out your objective and how to accomplish it. I mean, one thing I didn't get to experience was when you have to call Meryl, I think. You have to look at the back of your actual case, but since I played this digitally, you know, that wasn't a thing for me. Kind of missed out on that, but the fact that that was in the game in the first place is just really cool. I want to applaud this game for the backtracking being the perfect blend between necessary but not near as tedious as it could have been. It usually revolves around a gun you miss that's required for a boss or some type of gadget to progress the story, and you quickly learn that for the most part, you can find these items just by poking walking around naturally, and with the exception of maybe the key that requires you to change the temperature, you can almost play this entire game without any backtracking. The boss fights are a ton of fun. I think the fan favorite one is Psycho Mantis breaking the fourth wall. You know, she tells you like put your controller on the ground, or like, you know, your save file is corrupted, and you know, just all this crazy stuff that like makes you second guess, like, is this person actually watching me? Another thing I just couldn't figure out on my own was that you have to plug your controller into the port 2. You know, I just had to look that up, and obviously again, digital, there's no port 2. You had to like manually do it in the pause menu, which is kind of weird. But again, I just kind of like that shit. The villains and other characters don't stop here. You have Gray Fox, Meryl, Liquid Snake, Otacon, and of course Ocelot. You have that legendary brawl on top of Metal Gear Rex against Liquid to close this game out, and you take on plenty of twists and turns and double crossings of double crossings that would only be a taste for this out of your fucking mind narrative moving forward. This would also be the birth of a couple of tropes that would be hearsays in this series, like someone always pissing their pants. I thought this whole Otacon pissing his pants was gonna be like a one-off, but no, there's at least like one, probably like actually 3 people pissing their pants in every game. For a game that's getting close to 30 years old, you would think that it would start to feel its age at least a little bit, and in some ways it does. Aiming your gun system can be a little bit wonky, but other than that, I mean, this game is pretty easy to go back to. I think if you grew up during the PS2 era of gaming, this game should be no challenge to play in 2025, and bonus points for this game being more accessible than ever. Some extra bonus points are also the VR missions. Technically, I think this is a separate game, but the HD collection of the version I played had it like as a bundle, and just a bunch of like simulated scenarios that let you practice and like, you know, get better at kind of like mini levels. And when I mean a couple mini levels, I mean 300 of them. So yeah, I mean, if you like more Metal Gear, want to experience more gameplay, get better at it, or, you know, 100% the living hell out of it, you can do that. Anyways, this is where I knew I was getting into an absolute treat of a franchise, and I was blown away at this game. I think it aged really well. It sets up the story in an amazing way, and this is an S-tier experience. Now we have Metal Gear Ghost Babel, or simply Metal Gear on the Game Boy Color here in the United States. This has similar gameplay to the previous games, but I think this is at least just as good as Metal Gear 2, if not better. Unfortunately, this game isn't canon from what I understand, so if you like to connect the dots between the games, you're not going to be able to do that here. But I will say, for being a Game Boy Color game, this was a fantastic experience within the context of being a Game Boy Color game. What I really like about this game is it's much easier. It doesn't have that you difficulty of the other games, and actually gives you some type of direction, and you know, the codec is very useful in this. Anyways, we're about to talk about some masterpieces, not only within Metal Gear, but just gaming as a whole. So don't let this C-tier ranking fool you from thinking this is not a good game. Metal Gear Solid 2 seems to be one of the most diverse entries in the Metal Gear franchise. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you play as Raiden. You know, when you go from playing such a legendary and lovable character as Snake, and you go to another game where you play as someone, you know, no one really knows, it can be a little annoying. But I'm not gonna lie, I had no problem with Raiden. I know he kind of has like that Cal Kestis vibe to him, where he's kind of like quirky and whimsical. I don't know if you know if that's the right word for it. He's just a lot different than Snake. But I do say you get to play as Snake for the first like hour or two of the game in the prologue with the tanker mission. And this is an amazing prologue. It's basically kind of like a mini game within the game, because, you know, it sets up what's going to happen for the rest of the game. The opening credits for this game is a total James Bond inspired fever dream, and I love that too. The soundtrack is also good. I mean, granted, I didn't even talk about it. Metal Gear Solid 1 also banger soundtrack. I probably have already played it in like the intro or something. Anyways, instead of Shadow Moses, the game primarily takes place on the Big Shell, and the gameplay loop is roughly the same. Stay on one large map, gradually explore and unlock more of said map, grab new gear along the way, fend off a couple of bosses, and meet new characters. However, there are tons of upgrades to this gameplay loop, especially since we're on the PS2 and not the PS1 anymore. Obviously, the graphic got a substantial overhaul and are very impressive, including Raiden's cartoonishly large ass. Can someone please fucking explain why this man is so damn thick? The AI became much more sophisticated as well. One example that comes to mind is that I got alerted and the guy started, you know, phoning his friend the walkie-talkie, and I shot him, but instead of actually hitting him, I hit the walkie-talkie. And I feel like a lot of games, it would just like go through the walkie-talkie, or, you know, the person would just die, but instead he drops the walkie-talkie and the person's like, wait, we're coming in, we lost connection because the walkie-talkie exploded, and they send back up anyways. That's, again, the whole like snow in the footprints kind of thing from Metal Gear Solid 1. That's what's going on here. Just insane attention to detail. AI Metal Gear Solid 1 felt like an unlimited pit of enemies until you were hidden, but this game is a much more in-depth of the whole like alert system. Also, Raiden is a fucking acrobat in this game. I feel like we never get to play as like something crazy and like flamboyant as this. Another big improvement to the game is that you have first person aiming in this. Before, all it was a third person, kind of like early Resident Evil style, but now you can go full first person, you know, get those headshots with the sleeper dart gun and, you know, knock them out super easily. In Metal Gear Solid 1, you can go first person, and it's actually like a big part of the game to help you, like, you know, see different angles, but you can never actually shoot in first person. That's a nice quality of life change here. And I have to tip my hat to Sons of Liberty for being one of the most relevant stories, especially for modern day society. The fear and development of modern AI, especially today, is just like extremely relevant, and the very end of this game, like, it just hits so hard if you're playing it right now. And like, matter of fact, you know, you got your plenty of plot twists and turns, and it's just like a total mindfuck, honestly. They all kind of are, but this one's just like actually kind of scary. Then the villains, you have Solidus Snake and obviously Liquid Snake's back, but my personal favorite's gotta be Vamp, this like guy who has like vampire superpowers and then has this all like zesty ass walk during the boss fight. I don't know, I just totally fucked with this guy's aesthetic. Don't get me wrong, there were also some sad moments in Metal Gear Solid 1, but in Sons of Liberty it gets turned up a notch, like when EE dies and Otacon's just like an absolute mess, and you really can like feel the love he had for her, which apparently the love was like love from this Reddit thread, and they're like related, so kind of some fucking bullshit incest going on there. Not really digging that. But shortly after that, we got the iconic dap up between Otacon and Snake, which feels like it was ripped straight from the Predator. Fuck yeah.
Dylan! You son of a bitch.
Also, while we're talking about EE, the part where you have to escort her, a lot of people did not like, but for whatever reason, I gave a shit enough about the story that like I didn't mind it that I was being held back by this girl who literally walks like a fucking half mile an hour. The game had a different vibe than a lot of the other main entries. Not necessarily in its gameplay, but more so in its aesthetic. I get like really hard like Evangelion vibes for some reason. I know every game at least has one type of Metal Gear in it, and so, but for whatever reason, I could just hear a Cruel Angel's thesis playing this game. Another one of my favorite parts of this game is when Snake, Iroquois Pliskin shows up, and you're not supposed to know that it's Snake, but it's literally the same voice actor, looks dead up like him. But the really fun part is obviously I wasn't supposed to know this, and I still didn't technically, but if you ever watch Escape from New York, you know the main protagonist Kurt Russell plays is Snake Plissken. This guy's codename being Pliskin, you kind of put it together, and it's like, oh shit, like maybe that's actually Snake. And it's not really hard to, it's not like I did some fucking like code cracking by any means, but Kojima was actually heavily influenced by Escape from New York for the Metal Gear series. Anyways, it may come to a surprise that this was actually my favorite game in the franchise. It took everything great about the first game and turned it into a more refined experience with upgraded and better versions of just about everything. Maybe it's me being new to the franchise, but I actually really liked playing as Raiden, and the prologue was unforgettable. This is the S+ ranking for the video. The Twin Snakes is a remake of Metal Gear Solid exclusive for the GameCube. It's relatively faithful to the original with a few differences. First and foremost, the graphical overhaul that was utilizing the same graphic engine in Metal Gear Solid 2. We also had a re-recording of the voice acting, which is another controversial decision, but apparently was necessary because they recorded it in an apartment initially, and the GameCube like audio, something with the GameCube audio files would have made it like unbearable to hear it this way. I don't know. So that's different enough to maybe like piss some people off. Another change was there were some new cutscenes added or reimagining of old cutscenes that weren't in the original either. But the change that pissed a ton of people off was the addition of going first person with your gun, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but in a game that wasn't designed with that in mind makes it comedically easy. I know we just talked about how awesome Liberty was for having this feature, but that's because it's in a game that was built around it. Regardless, this was probably a lot of people's first time ever playing Metal Gear Solid 1 because, you know, the GameCube was, a lot of people had that, you know, maybe they didn't have a PS2 or a PS1 rather. I wouldn't be pissed if this is my first time playing it, but overall, I would still steer people towards the PS1 version, and especially now that it's like super readily available, I would not play this version as my first time playing, but it still gets a B tier. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is what many consider to be the best game in the entire franchise, and it's really easy to see why. Before we get into it, I want to disclose that I played the HD collection version, which I think is also the Subsistence version, meaning I had like, you know, the traditional third-person camera. I didn't have the locked camera angle that you did like with the other two games, and this game technically shipped with actually. But so far, if you'd only played Metal Gear 1 or 2, you know, not Solid or Solid 2, you'd always hear about Big Boss, but didn't know too much about him. But now you actually get to play as him, and it's just a super satisfying unveiling of this insane story. Hands down, this is the most important game for the entire franchise moving forward. You get so much context and so much lore and so many characters and so many insane fucking twists that like almost don't make sense. That being said, this is also the first game in the chronological timeline, so yeah, a pretty relevant game here. Also, when you boot up the HD collection, there's a disclaimer every time you load it in where it says like some of these elements may not have aged well, you know, basically saying like maybe there's some racist shit or bigotry here, and I hadn't really seen that before. You know, maybe they're like sexist towards the women here and there. But then you load up Metal Gear Solid 3 and you see fucking Snake wearing blackface. Fuck this bigot. Whoa. While we're here, actually, we have a new camouflage system, which lets you alter your appearance, and then you have this little gauge in the top corner that says how blended in you are with the environment. You're in the jungle for the most part, or, you know, a fact, whatever it may be, but the terrain still does change enough to where like changing your outfit and your face paint really does make a difference. As a matter of fact, a lot of the menu options have changed. One is the whole healing system. You know, before it was just, you know, kind of like Zelda, you take a potion, you heal, or, you know, find some hearts, you heal. But now there's a full-blown, like, diagnose your sickness. Like, maybe you have a broken leg, you gotta, like, you know, unbreak it and then wrap it up. Or if you have, like, a bullet wound, you gotta clean it up, take out the bullet, poison, you know, take an antidote, whatever it may be. I didn't necessarily hate this. I thought it was kind of annoying because it told you what to use anyways, basically. So it just felt like menu navigating and that was it. But one change I don't really like about the inventory was that now you have 8 slots for weapons and items. Before it was unlimited, but the thing is, like, you have unlimited inventory space. You just have to manually equip which items are basically on your hotbar. Yeah, and just a nitpick here, maybe it didn't want you to just be able to navigate through your whole entire fucking inventory like super easily. Whatever, it's really not that big of a deal. Anyways, let's jump into the game itself, which starts with the Virtuous mission, which may single-handedly be the most important event in the entire Metal Gear franchise. Above Shadow Moses, above Les Enfants Terribles, and maybe even Snake Eater also. In this prologue, seeing the boss turn on you while subliminally introducing the Cobras gives you a taste of what's to come. Once you commence Operation Snake Eater, you're given the best story in the series, with even more double crossings of double crossings, and then Ocelot, who's like a triple, quintuple, sextuple, double agent extravagant. Can someone fucking tell me whose side this guy's on? I genuinely tried to understand who he swore allegiance to originally and who he ended up with, and you could not get a straight answer. The levels are much more diverse than any other game we've had so far, which before, you know, it was always just like on one designated area that like kind of maybe you change like once throughout the entire game. And you know, we love the villains here. The villains in this game are so outlandish. The Hornet guy comes to mind for me. My favorite part is where the Pain is like, you know, throwing all his hornets around, and Ocelot is using his like revolver to spin it around to get the hornets away from him. That's just like the most 80s action hero bullshit I've ever seen. You know, the sorrow, the pain, the fear, the end, like, and the sniper guy, there's a thing where like if you're fighting him in the boss fight and you leave your PS2 on for like I think like a full-blown week, he will die of old age. I will say, although abundant, I still prefer the boss fights of Metal Gear Solid 1 more. That's just a personal preference. I know I kind of cheese the Shagahad boss fight because if you like spam your equip and unequip, your gun will reload, and you have unlimited RPGs at this point, and you can just destroy him with those. So that was kind of cheesy on my part, definitely took away from the experience, but again, that's just me being a dumbass idiot. But regardless, this is the best and most relevant story in the series, and you're constantly getting more information and revealing up until the very end credit scene. Specifically, Ava's confession at the very end is just an absolute mind fuck. I mean, it's insane to say that she was on, you know, part of the Chinese government the whole entire time, and then reveals the boss's true intentions, which hits so hard. And then you get that legendary salute at the very end of the game that the big boss hits the boss with, and it's honestly like a really sad moment and just tragic. The whole time you're like against the boss and you think like, why the hell is she a traitor? And she really wasn't, just kind of like, you know, doing what she's told as like the loyal soldier she is. I'm probably gonna piss a lot of people off with this one, but I'm giving this the A tier. I think Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 are more enjoyable for me personally. What if I told you there was a deck-building, turn-based RPG Metal Gear game spin-off? Looking no further than Metal Gear Acid. Let me get one thing straight. My biggest hobby, probably outside of gaming in this very moment of time, is Magic the Gathering. I know a thing or two about TCGs. I don't, you know, do the bullshit collecting. I'm all about the game. But I still had a really hard time getting into Metal Gear Acid. This is a series that just did not need this kind of game. It's not a bad game by any means. It kind of just feels random. And in some weird way, if they remade this game for like a mobile phone and like, you know, fleshed it out a little bit more, this would probably be a game I would play on my phone. But once again, the story is not canon, or argued about how much is canon, so I had a hard time getting into it. I think the sequel, yes, there's a sequel we're about to talk about, is at least a letter grade above this. If you want a nice little time waster or something to, you know, fuck around on your PSP with, yeah, this was a handheld. It makes sense that this game exists, I guess. There's some really fun elements to this game. Obviously, you get to pick your cards and whatnot, and you can have like a full-blown Metal Gear Rex to call in on like a single troop. Just ridiculous shit like that. I'm in. But again, it's not canon. If you want to play it, great. It's a D tier. Acid 2 is a better version of Acid, and the one big upgrade that I noticed right off the bat was that you can walk around and do things, sort of. Before it was either one or the other, but now it's kind of like combined the two and just made for a whole new plane of gameplay. Again, it's still just a stealth action RPG, deck builder, turn-based RPG thing going on here, so don't really know what kind of genre of game to call this. I guess it's like Fire Emblem, but I don't really play Fire Emblem like that. You know, except they got all these fuckers in Smash, though. If you're gonna play one, you could play this one, I guess, but this is still a C tier. Portable Ops is a very tricky entry for the franchise. This is another game that Kojima technically had no hand in making, and you can sort of see that, but not in a big way. It's a very bite-sized game, obviously making sense considering it was for the PSP. The missions are extremely short, and they usually rely on just like one little objective, and then it's kind of like extraction based. Speaking of extraction based, you have like this intel team where you recruit other soldiers and kind of create an empire, which we'll get into in a later game, but I don't want to go too in depth to it here because it's pretty much nothing in comparison to about what's to be. From what is canon, this is another very important bridge between another game that is very relevant in the storyline. I wouldn't call this a necessary game to play, but it is pretty solid for being a handheld game. I don't really like the handheld controls that much though. It's relatively short and sweet. You know, you can probably finish this in like 5 hours, but I think a C tier is more than fair. Now we're at the conclusion of Solid Snake's story in Metal Gear Solid 4. Let me get one thing straight. Playing this game in 2025 is such a pain in the fucking ass. You absolutely have to have a PS3 unless you emulate it, but emulating anything like 360 PS3 onward has been a pain in the ass in my experience. So I bought a PS3 off eBay. It came in, even though it said it worked, it did not work. Then I had to send it back, and then I just ended up buying on Marketplace. Anyways, with all the delays and like setbacks, this was actually the very last game I played for this video. And I'm actually really happy it worked out this way because this, as most people know, is the very last game in the franchise. Chronologically speaking, I guess, except for one other game. Also, PS3s and capture cards don't get along very well. Apparently it has something to do with HDCP, which you can't disable in PS3, and you have to buy an adapter, but it's already so far behind that I didn't get the adapter, so full disclosure, none of this is my gameplay, just straight up. Old Snake is your protagonist as he's rapidly aging, and you take on Liquid Ocelot and the Patriots AI. This is actually the first game that makes you feel like you're actually fighting a war because you're in the middle of like multiple battlefields, you know, with a bunch of just like full-scale wars going on. You haven't really seen that in this franchise before, so I liked that. Although the setting is awfully depressing, this game has the most comedic relief of any other game in the series. You've got Akaba, or Johnny, whose whole thing is just shitting his pants. Not like farting, I mean like full-blown like shit in his underwear and like, you know, poop stains, like that kind of thing. You've also got Deborah's monkey who likes to rail heaters like crazy. And spoiler alert, even in one of the most serious parts of arguably the entire franchise, you see Major Zero, you know, as a vegetable, and even he finds a way to just piss his pants, like in what, like seriously, one of the most like jaw-dropping moments of the game. But the gameplay is fine when you actually get to experience it. I say that because I swear, I think I didn't play this game longer than 25 minutes consecutively without getting hit with a cutscene. Look, I love storytelling. It's, you know, Metal Gear fucking rocks in that, but this was absolutely egregious. The cutscenes are great. I mean, when Raiden and Vamp do their little like sword fight, it's straight up like Duel of the Fates vibes. I mean, it really gives Anakin, Obi-Wan, Mustafar lightsaber fight like a run for its money. I enjoyed the gameplay, but one, it didn't really change too much, which I'm not really complaining about that, but there just wasn't a lot of it. I mean, it was like really just like watching a movie, which you can say about basically any other game on the franchise, but this one was like just really, really bad in that way. You feel so much heartbreak. I mean, the one that comes to mind is when Naomi unalives herself and Otacon is just super sad. Bro can't catch a break. Also, why the fuck did she do this? Like, is there any reason besides plot convenience? I mean, can someone give me an answer as to why Naomi did this? I mean, makes no sense. You get to see the turn of Psycho Mantis for another memorable boss fight, and then you make it to the end of the game where you get everything wrapped up with a beautiful bow on top of Raiden getting to be with Rose after revealing the Colonel had a fake marriage with her to keep them safe. And he's got a kid. We also get to see Meryl and Mr. Shit Your Pants get married, but then in the most M. Night Shyamalan bullshit ass twist, you see Big Boss return. I wish I had my reaction recording this because, again, you know, PS3 capture card thing, but I was genuinely just like shell shocked. Maybe I was supposed to see this coming, but it was just fucking mind-blowing. Like it really was wild, you know, being revealed that he was in a vegetative state under the Patriots AI, but then since Snake destroyed the Patriots AI, it's like, wow, okay, I guess that actually kind of makes sense in a weird way. Getting to hear him monologue about all of his wrongdoings and mistakes, and then, you know, warning Solid about not doing the same thing, only to muster up the strength one more time to salute Boss right as he peels over, is just simply poetic. I mean, seriously, I cannot think of a better way to wrap up this franchise. If you notice, I barely talked about the gameplay of this game, and that's because there's not much to be said. I mean, you can buy guns from Drebus, and that was like a cool new feature. And going back to Shadow Moses and it being the exact same way it was before, you know, as far as the layout, another really nice treat. This is the one you don't really play for the gameplay. You're playing for the story, and it's a good one. This is a B tier. I'm not sure what to consider Peace Walker, as if it's a spin-off or like a mainline, because it is actually so relevant for the story. We once again follow Big Boss as he creates MSF, and a lot of people love this game, but I just wasn't exactly super thrilled with it. Part of that's because I had a major fuck up. I actually bought the HD collection, which has Peace Walker on it. You can play it as on a console, but for whatever reason, I missed that and ended up emulating this on the PSP. So I played the PSP version through emulation, which was kind of scuffed, but I don't know, the game itself just wasn't exactly hitting. It's a much more linear style game, which once again, it's a PSP game, it makes sense that it works that way. The missions are super A to B, there's barely any objectives, it's kind of more so just like get to this location or kill it, whatever it may be. But the recruitment aspect from Portable Ops has been much more fleshed out as we're introduced to Mother Base. This is where you recruit new members to MSF as you expand your empire to unlock more gear and traits. This quickly became a game within the game that then would get even more fleshed out with another future title, so I don't want to go too in depth here, but this was very impressive with how like the sky was the limit. The game feels a lot more like a Metal Gear game than any other spin-off we've talked about so far, and we have these beautiful comic book cutscenes that sometimes have little interactive bits between them. But for being a PSP game, this was actually more than serviceable. The story is extremely relevant and leads right into Ground Zeroes, which we'll talk about here in a second too. If you're not going to play this game, at least look up what happens in it, because it is extremely relevant. It's also a B tier. With Snake Eater being a massive hit and Twin Snakes being a semi-relevant remake, it was only a matter of time before another remake hit. Thus, Snake Eater 3D for the Nintendo 3DS was born. For disclosure, I played this on an emulator. I actually got it to run pretty well because I do actually have my 3DS, but this game, for whatever reason, is ridiculously expensive. I think it's from like a collector's item at this point, or maybe had limited release. I don't know. But it's kind of a Twin Snakes scenario here. I mean, the game's fine. It plays well, especially for being on a handheld. It has the same like Portable Ops controls, which I wasn't thrilled with. I wouldn't really go back to play this game. There's really no reason to, unless you want a handheld, you know, version. But at the same time, you're probably much better off just buying one of those bullshit like all-in-one 8+ console emulator, 1,000+ games, little things off the TikTok shop, and just playing the PS2 version on the go. If you really want to, it's probably much cheaper to do it that way too. But I mean, the graphics got like a somewhat of an upgrade. You can't really tell because, I mean, this is a 3DS game running a PS2 game, so whatever you want to make of that. This is whatever. I mean, it's a C tier. Metal Gear Rising. This is another game that is argued whether how much is canon or not, but I don't give a fuck because this game was fucking sick. When you load up the game, Raiden steps out of a limo, shattering the pavement with his first step, taking on a Metal Gear, jumps on the rockets to get to said Metal Gear, slices it in half, and then caps it off with doing the whole cool guys don't look explosions bit. And this is in the first like 4 minutes of the game, and it sets the bar for what you're about to get yourself into. It's a much different experience than all the other Metal Gear games we've talked about, and I would actually go as far to say this game is more different than any other Metal Gear game, even more so than Metal Gear Acid. The hack and slash, you know, gore fest where you're just fucking slicing people up, just insane graphics and whatnot. You know, there really wasn't much gore in Metal Gear so far. You know, there'd be blood from, you know, maybe someone bleeding from their neck when you shoot them there or whatever, but now you can like rip through their body and like take out their spine and harvest it like a glory kill in Doom. I didn't follow the story too much aside from Armstrong being one of the most memeable villains ever. Although being a more vibrant game, the game did get pretty dark with like the story being like children getting turned into cyborgs. Anyways, this is a short and sweet game. You can get it on Steam still, and I think I had it for like $10. It's like 7 to 8 hours of gameplay of just like mindless, just kind of like, what's that, Hyrule Warriors, kind of like that, I guess. But I will say the end boss fight gave me so much trouble. I didn't find this game particularly difficult, but then I fought Armstrong in the final phase, and it took me about 7 to 8 hours to beat, and I would legit say probably 3 hours was on this last phase. I could not beat this shit for the life of me, but we got there. This was a nice break from the slower paced Metal Gear gameplay, and you even got like that one perv guy in the security guard booth, like looking at anime tits. I know it's so different that I could see, I'm not surprised more people just fucking despise this game, but I had a blast. A tier. Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes acts as the prologue of the Phantom Pain. Technically speaking, this was the only Metal Gear game I had ever played before this video, and that's because I think it went free on Games with Gold way back in the day. I never beat it or anything. I think I loaded up the first level and, you know, I didn't have much connection to the franchise, obviously, because I had not played any other game. But let's just say I can totally see why this game went free with Games with Gold shortly after release. The game is notoriously short, and if I'm being honest, I have no fucking idea how they got away with this. It's legit just one mission, and you do one objective, and then there's credits. Granted, yeah, sure, there's the training missions or whatever. There's a handful of them. You can like beat those to living death, but they have nothing to do with the story or anything, and they're all on the same map. In its defense, this game is very easy to get your hands on. It's usually bundled in with the Phantom Pain for a extremely low price. But if I was like a diehard Metal Gear fan and I was like, oh my gosh, new game, can't wait, and then I got this, I would be absolutely devastated. People don't seem to be pissed at it, and I'm not exactly like super mad this exists because of how cheap of a price I got it for. The meat and potatoes of this game don't even dive into like appetizer territory. This is like not even a sample of a game, but it is pretty relevant for the story setting up Phantom Pain, and it's honestly like pretty gruesome at the very last frame. Don't even know if I can show that on YouTube. I will say this is where they got rid of David Hayter and introduced Kiefer Sutherland as the voice actor for Snake, and all I can hear is Sergeant Roebuck from World at War.
Those sons of bitches really put a hurting on us. A lot of good men died today. All for nothing.
This is a C tier. The Phantom Pain, like Snake Eater, is a lot of people's favorite in the franchise, and yet again, I can totally see why. Taking what was always been a linear experience up until this point and going open world with it is an ambitious task, but it surely paid off. I want to start by talking about the prologue. This was a very long mission that saw you waking up 9 years after the Ground Zeroes incident. By the way, I overheard like the ending in this game through friends in Discord like a year ago, and so I had the whole entire game spoiled for me from the get-go. But looking back at it, when you're playing this game, even though I subliminally knew what was happening at the very end, it's kind of like in your face, sort of. It's kind of weird. Spoiler, but why would you create an avatar if you're not Big Boss? I mean, I don't know. Anyways, you're greeted by this guy who definitely doesn't have the same exact voice as you or profile as Big Boss. Then you get to see a young Psycho Mantis, this flame dude who spawns in a whale that's on fire, watch tons of innocent people get slaughtered, and just set up a devastating and just like emotional beginning for what's to come. I mean, sick ass prologue, but unfortunately, for me at least, the rest of the game did not feel anything like this. There's a total of 50 main ops, and I swear 30 of them are extract this person or blow this thing up. And this is where I have my issues with the game. 80% of the time, it feels like whatever I'm doing has nothing to do with advancing the ongoing story or has any relevance to it. Don't get me wrong, the gameplay and beating these missions are a blast. This is the best gameplay in the series, hands down. But when the tasks at hand feel like they have nothing to do with what's going on in the story, it takes you out of it a little bit. And this is emphasized even more in the second half of the game. The second half of this game is a total drag, which sucks because the last mission of the first half ends with such a fucking banger, but a lot of the missions that are labeled main ops are just replayable missions with a harder difficulty, total stealth, or you drop in with no loadout, or just like a super hard difficulty. And it makes me feel like you have to play these missions, which I actually played almost all of them until I realized you didn't have to play them, which also makes no sense because then there's the side ops, which a lot of them are required, but some of the main ops aren't. I don't know, it just was like really confusing to me. It wasn't a deal breaker by any means, but the pacing of the game was just really hard to get into. So with that being said, the story does suffer, and the game wants you to listen to all these audio tapes that give you a lot of lore and backstory, and I did listen to a good bit of them, but at the same time, I'd rather just have that cutscene. I know Metal Gear Solid 4 had way too much of that. I just wish there was more of that in this game. And to emphasize those cliffhanger moments, you'll have missions that straight up end with, you know, like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure to be continued, straight like there's in the middle of like an explosion or something, and then the next scene you'll be in your helicopter like, oh, I need to start that mission now, or like I can go fucking hunt a bear in the wilderness and then come back to this mission. It just felt weird that it was like mission based instead of like, you know, putting one mission after the other. I didn't really like it. Speaking of missions, fuck this truck mission. This was so unbelievably difficult, like way more difficult than any mission in the entire game. I had to cheese this. I had to wear the bullshit chicken hat just to get over. I was getting so fucking mad at this part. Please, if someone else had the same experience, drop it down below. I would love to know. The side ops are another weird thing in this game where some of them are mandatory and others aren't. I poked around a good bit trying to get each interpreter or special blueprints or whatever else. There are some side ops that just need to be main ops. For example, the mission where you discover that the fire dude's actually Volgan was a side op. I mean, don't you think that's kind of like pretty relevant reveal that should be part of the main story? But enough about the mission structure, let's dive into the game itself. The mother-based system from Peace Walker makes a return, and now we've got possibly the most complex and sophisticated series of progression, upgrades, and unlocks in any game ever. Seriously, this is like playing like Simpsons Tapped Out or Clash of Clans on steroids. There is so much progression and unlocks and upgrades to do here. The whole progression system seems to always be getting some new angle added to it, and you can go full-blown ADHD min-max the absolute living shit out of it, which if you want 100% every single, you know, item and upgrade, I mean, there's unlimited content for you here if you really want to do that. I feel like I barely scratched the surface and I beat the entire game, and there was just so much to do. And also, but in defense, I also saw no real reason to use the other guns that I was using. I really like this AR I found and the sniper were like, these are my two things that carried me through the game. I feel like it's much more about like, you know, getting custom outfits. You know, I gotta wear like the Snake Eater tuxedo and shit. I mean, I like that kind of stuff. But regardless, having infinite options for gear, weapons, you know, and all that stuff is something you should just never complain about. I did have one problem with this, is that when you upgraded certain things, you'd have to wait a period of time, like actual in-game time, not even like idle time. I remember it only came up one time where I wanted to get like the child Fulton extraction device, and I was on a mission where you had to use that to get the kid off the edge or else he'd fall off. I literally just left my PC on for like 20 minutes just so I can get this and then finish the mission. I don't really like that. I mean, that's kind of stupid, I'll be honest. Mother Base is just the tip of the iceberg of this game. There's so much replayability considering each mission gives you a letter grade and rewards off of the performance. The stealth is good, the buddy system is creative, and to me, one of the most important things when you're picking your loadout. You can also play as other characters if you really want to. You get this lineup of sexy ass snipers on top of Kojima designing a character who it has to breathe through her skin and always has to be exposed. Yeah, that's real. Like, what the fuck is that camera angle? But I really enjoyed my time with Phantom Pain, and although the second half dragged on and the story felt very irrelevant at times, this is a really good game for newer players, maybe right after Snake Eater, especially when you consider like where it is in the timeline. But I will say the ending kind of does help. The narrative of everything you do in this game is fucking pointless. It leads into, you know, Big Boss being evil, whatever else in the future. I mean, it plays into that pretty well. I do think this game teeters a little bit towards overrated, but it's still a very good game. This is an A tier. Metal Gear Survive is the first game developed after Kojima's departure from Konami, and it shows. It's a survival horror game that takes place after the Ground Zeroes incident, that's also in a alternate timeline, but also reveals to be the dystopian future towards the end of the game. Yeah, kind of some Planet of the Apes nonsense going on here. Yeah, I mean, even within the context of Metal Gear, for some weird reason, that somehow does make sense, being like a zombie apocalypse or whatever these things are. But it's very clear that this is not what Kojima had in mind, and you can even just like tell, it feels like they just slapped the Metal Gear IP on this. I wish they would have put literally any other IP on this game. The game itself really isn't that bad, but you can just tell this did not have Kojima's blessing whatsoever. It's an F tier. And now we got the most recent release being Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, the remake of the beloved classic preserved in its greatness with basically nothing untouched. As stated before, as a new player myself, I think this is a great place to pick up and, you know, start the franchise. That is if you can get over the $70 price tag. Did they go hard with the graphics? Of course. Is it a great time? Absolutely. Did the stars align to find the right group of developers to preserve this classic while upgrading at the same time? You got that too. But for $70, this is one of the most ridiculous price gouges of all time. That's all I can really think of when I played this game. I mean, it's great. You know, you get to relive all these insane moments that, you know, again, we've already talked about this being the most important story, and you get to see updated versions of that story. This should be like maybe a $40 game. $50 would still be pushing it, but $70 is fucking wild. It's good. Look, the game's good. It's good. I'm just gonna, it's really good. It's fun. It's a great way to experience it, but I just cannot wrap my mind over this price tag. I can see this game getting like pretty aggressively marked down on sales and whatnot. This is probably just like this is probably one of those games that's gonna be a $7 game, but it's always going to be on sale one day. Maybe they add it to Game Pass or something, because $70 is just fucking wild, bro. I know I've said it like 4 times now, but it's egregious. The game is loosely unchanged. It's the same game, same experience. It's just a better way to experience it, arguably. You can also just get Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater on the HD collection for like $20, and even that's a fucking gouge if I'm being honest. But I'm still gonna give it a B tier. It's a fun game. But anyways, this is the Metal Gear Solid franchise ranked. What do you think of my ranking here? I know you hate that ranking right there. You think that's bullshit, and it probably is, but I had fun making this video, and that's how I feel about this. Also, if you made it this far in the video, maybe consider subscribing, leave a like. Also, I think YouTube added a hype mechanic, whatever the fuck this is, you know, hype the video. Yeah, hype that shit. If you want to hear me talk about every Lord of the Rings game or every single Far Cry game, click on screen now. And if you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, and thank you so much for watching.